Hello everyone, welcome to iFashi. Have you been seeing this beautiful mesh dress? We had a poll last week and this dress won the vote, and I want to say a big thank you to all of you that participated in that poll. Today, we'll be teaching us how to cut and sew this beautiful dress. Here is the one we made in this tutorial, guys. You see how beautiful it looks on me. This dress is a very stunning dress. So guys, if this is something you're interested in, let's get right into it. Here is my pattern paper that we'll be drafting on, and I'll be starting with the front pattern. And as you can see, my pattern paper is placed on fold. Because of the type of neckline we are working with, endeavor to place your pattern paper on fold. And here is the mesh fabric that I'll be using for this project and a lycra lining. Because the mesh is stretchy, I decided to use a stretchy lining for it, which is the lycra. So some persons do not put lining on their mesh dresses. They just wear it and wear another inner on it. But I'll be adding a lining because it's not every time I'll have to be looking for an inner to wear the dress. So I just decided to go for something that is a bit close to my skin, like brownish, so that it will not be obvious that there's a lining inside. So we are going to keep these fabrics aside and then start drafting our front pattern. On this my pattern paper, I have my starting line at the top of my paper. So I'll start taking all my vertical measurements downwards from that top line. So the first is my bust point, which is 10 inches from my shoulder down, and then my under bust 13 inches, and then the front half length, which is 17.5 inches. So I'll mark all these points and draw a straight line on these points, then label the lines so that we'll know what these lines are for. Now, after getting out the bust line, under bust line and waistline, I'm going to go to the hip line by taking 9 inches from my waistline downwards. So I'll measure 9 inches downwards from the waistline. I'll mark a line there and label it the hip line. So after the hip line, going down, this is a very long dress. I don't want to start joining paper, so when I'm cutting on fabric, I'll just add what is remaining from my hip downwards to get the full length. So we're going to start taking our measurements on this line, and the first line we're going to start with is my chest line. So to get your chest line, which is our armhole line from shoulder to the bust line, we're going to divide your bust by 6 and add 1.5 to your answer. So if your bust is 37 like me, when you divide 37 by 6, you add 1.5, it gives you 7.6. So I'll just mark that point there and label it our chest line. Some persons just take 2 inches upwards from the bust line to get their chest line. For me, I use the formula to get my accurate armhole, which is that chest line. Now that we are done with this chest line, we're going to go to the top of our paper, which is our shoulder line, and take our shoulder measurement divided by 2. I'm marking 8 inches here because my shoulder is 16 inches, and I'll come down with 1 inch for the shoulder slope because our shoulder is not straight. Now, I'm going to take 3.3 for my neck measurements because I already explained that 3.3 in our previous tutorials. You divide your bust by 16 and add 1 inch. This is the formula to get your neck measurement. So I input 3.3 on my neckline and I connect it to meet my shoulder slope. I'll also take that 3.3 coming downwards for the neck depth, right? So we're going to now use our curve ruler to connect this 3.3 on the shoulder and on the neck depth to mark out our neck line. Now after doing this, we're going to connect this shoulder slope to meet our chest line. So we're going to take this same 8 inches, the shoulder measurement we have on the shoulder line, take it on the chest line and connect it with a straight ruler to meet up with the shoulder slope that we marked out. And now we have our armhole point out. The next is to curve this armhole. You know, usually we divide this straight line by 2 and mark out the midpoint, and on that midpoint we'll go inwards by 0.5, but this is a very stretchy fabric. I'm going to go inwards by 1 inch. Then I'll connect these 3 lines, which is the shoulder, the 1 inch, and our bust measurement on the chest line. So take your bust measurement divided by 4 on the chest line. All of the measurements will be taken for this tutorial. We are removing 1 inch from our main measurements because this is a very stretchy fabric. So I took my bust measurement divided by 4 minus 1 on my chest line and I connected it to meet my shoulder. That is what is giving me this armhole curve that we have here. So I'm going to take the same bust measurement divided by 4 minus 1 on my bust line, then take my waist measurement divided by 4 minus 1 on the waist line. Like I said before, this is a stretchy fabric. We are not even going to add sewing allowance to this project because mesh is very stretchy. If you really want it to fit and hug you, you're going to have to reduce your measurements by either 0.5 or 1 inch. So all of the measurements I took from the waist down to the hip to the bust, I reduced it by 1 inch before I divided it by 4, right? After dividing it by 4, I reduced it by 1 inch and then I impute my answer on my pattern paper. And now after imputing all these measurements on these lines, I'm going to connect all of them together from the armhole down to the waist and from the waist down to the hip. Now at the end of this my pattern paper, I'm also going to take my hip measurement minus 1 because the hip does not extend to this point and it's not up to my knee measurement yet, right? So I'm going to minus 1 from my hip and connect it downwards, so the dress will go straight down like that. So the next thing I'm going to do now is to take my dart on this pattern paper. I'll go ahead and impute my bust span measurements on the bust line, the under bust line, and the waistline, and also extend that with 6 inches downwards from the waistline. So I'll take 6 inches downwards from the waistline where the dart will stop. Now, mind you, this is a mesh dress. We're not going to be holding a dart, but I want you to understand something with this dart that I'm holding here. First reason is we're going to remove this dart from the side. We can just go ahead and remove the dart from the side without knowing where it's coming from, right? But I'm imputing the dart on this pattern paper because I will still use this pattern paper to make another dress. So after taking this waist dart, I'm going to also divide my shoulder measurement by 2 and take my 0.5 inch dart there. After dividing it by 2, I'll mark out the midpoint and connect it to meet my bust line. After making that connection on that shoulder line, I'm going to take 0.5 inch dart. It's a very small dart, but it is very important to tighten that shoulder part when you're making some dresses. We will not be using this dart for this dress. The only dart we need for this dress is this waist dart. The next thing I'm taking is my side bust dart as well. This side bust dart is the difference between your front waist measurement and your back waist measurement. My front waist is 17.5 and my back waist is 16 inches. So I will need to remove the 1.5 inch difference so that when I join, it will be equal. Like I said before, we will not be using this dart for this dress. I want to use this pattern to make another dress. The dart we'll be using for this dress is this waist dart that we took. Now I'm going to extend this waist dart to the side. I'll take this 1 inch that we have as our dart on the waist. I'll come inwards from the waistline by that same 1 inch and I'll connect it to meet this 6 inches dart extension. Just watch closely and see what I'm doing. I marked the 6 inches extension of our dart. I marked it just before the hip. So I'll now use my curve ruler to connect from this 1 inch that I came in with, connect it upwards to meet our bust line where the dart starts from, right? And I also make the connection to meet the 6 inches where the dart ended. So without removing that center dart, we have removed it from the side. So I would have just gone ahead to do this one initially, but I want you to know where this 1 inch is coming from that we are taking off. And also, like I mentioned, I'll be using this pattern paper to make another dress. Now, as you can see on the waistline, I have my waist measurement, a very tight fitted waist measurement. I minus 1 inch from my waist so that it will fit me perfectly. And the next thing I'm going to do now is to use my tracing wheel to trace out all these measurements so that it will be showing on the other side of the paper. Remember, our pattern paper is on fold. Before we start working on the neckline, we need to mark out these lines that we have here on the other side. So I'll use my tracing wheel to trace it out and then use my ruler and marker to mark out the line so that it will be visible on the other side. It is after we mark out these lines that we can go ahead and work on the alterations we have on the neckline. So I'll speed up this video now so that we'll not waste much time doing this. Remember to subscribe if you haven't done that already. Thank you so much for watching to this point. Now, after tracing it out and marking the whole lines to make it visible on the other side, we're going to start working on the neckline. This dress has a stylish keyhole neckline on the front part. As you can see on your screen, I'm going to be teaching us how to achieve that neckline. So on this shoulder, we're going to come inwards by 1 inch. Because as you can see on your screen, the neckline is not starting exactly from the neck. It tilted towards the shoulder a bit, right? So after coming in with 1 inch, we're going to come to this bust line and determine how covered you want this chest line to be. Me, I went up with 1.5 from my bust. If you want to show more cleavage, you can go up with 1 inch. But mind you, this bust line is exactly at your nipple, right? So you're going to have to come up with either 1 inch or 1.5 or 2 inch, depends on how covered you want your chest to be. So now after marking 1.5 upwards, I'm using this red marker so that you see exactly what we're doing on this neckline. So from the armhole, you come inwards with 3 inches like I just did. After coming in with 3 inches, we are going to now mark out the midpoint of this from the shoulder down to our new chest line. After marking the midpoint, from the armhole line, come in with 5 inches. To come closer to the neckline a bit, and then use your ruler to connect these two together. You see what we just did? One side of the neck is out, and then on the second side, you're also going to go outwards with 0.5. This time around, I went out to 0.5, but you can also decide to use the same 1 inch on both sides. So after going out with on the other side of the shoulder, you just use your curve ruler like I'm doing. From this point, make a curve to meet the new chest line on the other side of the armhole. And then I tried to use my ruler to mark out this neckline, but I first of all had to trace it out first before I'll mark it out. Now this is the new line that we'll be working with for this dress. As you can see on your screen, the part that I use red marker is the keyhole neck design we have on the neckline. So the way it is on the paper, that's how it's going to come out on your dress. So if you want to have a bigger or smaller hole, this is the point where you adjust it. So let me take a little recap on what we just did to get this neckline. First of all, I came out with 1 inch from the neckline on the shoulder, and then on our new chest line, I went inwards with 3 inches towards the neck, right? And then on the other side, I didn't come inwards. I just used my curve ruler to connect it to meet the midpoint of this other chest part that we marked the midpoint to give that shape. So I'm going to keep the front pattern aside and draft out the back pattern. The back is not difficult. The first thing I'm going to be doing on the back piece is to take out 1 inch for my zipper allowance. And now I want you to know that most persons don't put zipper on their mesh dresses because it's very stretchy, but my waist is very tight, and the difference between my waist and my hip measurements is more than 12 inches, and because of that difference, it will be difficult for the waist to pass through my hip when I'm about to wear it. This is why I am putting a zipper. So I have removed 1 inch for my zipper, and I've marked out the top line where I'll be taking my measurements downwards from. So the first measurement I'll mark is my shoulder to my bust point, and then my shoulder to the waistline. The back waist is different from the front waist, like I mentioned before. So I've marked out my hip line, my waistline, my bust line, and the chest line. I'll use my straight ruler now to mark out these lines before we start taking our horizontal measurements on these lines. And the first I'm going to start with is the shoulder line. Remember, all our measurements will start from the zipper extension. That is if you're putting a zipper. This zipper is totally optional. So I'll impute my neck measurement, which is 3.3, and my shoulder measurement on this same line. And then, just like we did for the front, come down to get our chest line. Remember the formula we used to get the chest line. So I'll connect this chest line upwards to meet the shoulder slope that we took, and connect from the shoulder slope to meet our neckline. I'll impute my bust measurements on both the bust line and on the chest line. Remember to remove at least 0.5 or 1 inch from your measurement. That is if you're working with a very stretchy fabric to make this dress. I've also taken my waist measurement and my hip measurement. The next thing I'll do is to connect these lines to meet each other. You see how simple this back pattern is? All you have to do is impute your measurement from your shoulder downwards to the hip and all the way to the length of your dress. Impute all of your vertical measurements and horizontal measurements divided by 4. Remember to minus like I mentioned before. Then we have our back out. I am not going to be taking the middle dart for this back because I did it for front for us to understand where we got our 1 inch from, right? So now I'm just coming in straight up from the waistline inwards with 1 inch, and I connected it down to 6 inches dart extension and upwards to our bust line, just like we did for front. The difference is there's no inner dart on this one. Now let's talk about the upper back of this dress. You can decide to do a keyhole on the back as well. First of all, we'll come down with 1 inch to get our neckline for back, right? This is our normal regular neckline. If you want to fix a zipper downwards from this neck down, is completely optional. If you want to open your back as well, what I did, I just came down with 1 inch from the neckline where my button will be fixed, either button or hook, whichever you want to use. After coming down with that 1 inch, I just placed my curve ruler to mark out this curve that will be opened on the back. It is very, very straight to the point. Now my zipper will stop at the end of this curve, which is this bust line. So in order for me to snatch my zipper, I'm going to come inward with 1 inch. That 1 inch zipper allowance I have on my waist, I'm removing it on the waist part only so that the zip will not budge on the back. So from that waistline, I'll use my straight ruler to connect straight down to meet the neck where the zipper is ending, and downwards towards the hip as well, so that I'll cut off the beginning of this paper to snatch my zipper at the back. I hope you understand to this point. If you don't, just drop your questions in the comments section. For those of us that already know how to draft a basic bodice, you will see that this is a regular basic bodice. The only difference is this front part that has this neckline, and I hope you understand how we got that neckline out. So I'm just going to go ahead and cut out my pattern paper that I'll be using to cut the fabric. Now, one thing you need to remember we came inwards on the neckline for front, from the front shoulder line, which means the back shoulder and the front shoulder will not align. What you have to do is, since the back pattern paper is not on fold, I'll have to cut out on my fabric first before I remove that 1 inch, because it is not equal. So if I remove 1 inch now, it will affect the other side. So I'll just hold on. When I'm cutting on fabric, I'll align the shoulders. Now for this keyhole we have in the front, this open space, as you can see on your screen, I have 2 pictures. The down one is a straight line. So if you want to achieve this down one, just maintain the straight line we already have on this our new chest line. Remember we went up from our bust line to get a new chest line, right? So now if you want it curved a bit, you're going to use your curve ruler to curve it to avoid it being straight like this down one. So that's what I just did here. I made a curve because I don't want it to be completely straight. Then I'll go ahead and cut out this part that will be opened. And that will be that for this front. As you can see, the pattern paper is giving us a sneak peek of how the dress is going to be already. In order not to take too much of our time, I'm just going to go ahead and cut this pattern paper on my fabric off camera, and I'll be right back to show you. Now this is what we have after cutting. I've cut the back piece and the lining as well. If you notice, for this back piece, my lining did not start from the neck. It started from the bust line downwards. I have only the mesh fabric from the shoulder down to the bust. So when we are sewing, I'm going to be showing you how I'll fold this lining on that bust part downwards. Then The lining also stopped at my knee line, and then we have our mesh all the way down to the full length of the dress. That's that for the back. For the front, this is what we have. I have my lining from the bust point down to my knee length as well, and then the mesh continued. This front is cut on fold, don't forget, we have it on fold. Then the neckline for the front, those two pattern paper, this is what we have. I've cut it open, and as you can see on your screen, this longer side, this side that has the longer part of the chest, has some excess fabric that made those squeeze there, right? So I cut my pattern paper open to give me that excess fabric that I would fold in. And this is my sleeve, cut on fold. I have double sleeves here, and if you notice, I folded my pattern paper inwards so that the sleeve will not be too big. This is a very stretchy fabric. If you don't know how to cut your sleeve, we have a detailed sleeve tutorial on the channel already. I'll be linking it in the description box. Still on the sleeve, these pieces of fabric you can see on your screen, I will use it to do the gathers we have at the down part of our sleeve. So it is 8 inches long and 30 inches wide. So I'll just keep it with the sleeve aside. And then another thing I also cut is these other pieces you're seeing on your screen. This one, we'll use it to achieve the gathers we have on the hip part of this dress. These gathers on the front part that you're seeing on your screen. What I have here is 33 inches in length. And I have 2 pieces of this, so I'm going to place it on the table like this. As you can see, I'll use one to cross the other to give me what we have here. So the front will be crossed like this, and these 2 sides will be gathered on the hip sides, the 2 hip sides. So in our next video, I'll be taking us through how we put all of these pieces together to make this beautiful dress. This is the most beautiful dress I've made recently, and it's so cute and also very easy to make. Remember to subscribe and turn on your notification bell so that you'll be notified whenever we drop a tutorial. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you in the part 2 of the making of this dress.